Welcome back to the Rise and Reinvent podcast, the podcast where bold transitions and authentic leadership take center stage. Today's guest is Dr. Nicole Price, engineer turned empathy, revolutionary, speaker, and CEO of Lively Paradox. Once known as the Nickinator, Dr. Price built a reputation for getting results in high pressure environments. But behind the steel exterior was a journey of reinvention, sparked by failure, loss, and the healing power of self awareness. In this episode, Dr. Price shares how she transformed from a hard nosed leader into an advocate for empathy in leadership and in life. From corporate shakeups and personal discovery to building a mission driven company, her story is one of truth telling, tenacity, and learning to sit in the discomfort of growth. If you've ever struggled to balance ambition with grace or wondered how to lead with empathy in a results driven world, this episode is for you. Let's go. Today, I am delighted to welcome Dr. Nicole Price, the CEO of Lively Paradox. Nicole is a respected leader. She has a paradoxical career that has spanned engineering, HR, keynote speaking, and entrepreneurship. Today, she describes herself as an empathy revolutionary who engineers empathy in organizations. Welcome to the Rise and Reinvent podcast, Nicole.
Thank you for having me, Nicole. I appreciate it.
I'm so excited you're here and I'm looking forward to this conversation. So, to kick us off, can you tell us briefly who you are? Not your title, but the person behind the title and your career.
Yeah, I think of myself as a lively paradox. I was described that way by a high school teacher in fact, I didn't even know at the time what the word paradox meant. But I am that person who is logical and reasonable, but has gotten a lot of skill at empathy and compassion. I am the person who will tell it like it is, but spend great amounts of energy to make sure that whatever I say and how I say it lands in the spirit of people in a decent way. I enjoy comedy probably far more than I should, which gets me in trouble sometimes. And I desperately, desperately want for my son to be successful, knowing that his journey is his journey. And so I bring that up because sometimes I've learned I can be a little controlling.
Okay. Okay. That's a great overview to get us started. I appreciate that. And thank you for clarifying the paradoxical definition and how it really comes to life for you. So, what would you say is your greatest personal achievement, something that you're most proud of?
I think embracing my healing journey. I don't know that if you would have asked that question 5 years ago, I would have even had the courage to say that. Today, what I have learned is that there's so much about who I used to show up as. And just for context, people used to call me the Nickinator. It was a combination between my name, Nicole, and the Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator character. Because I was just so hard-nosed. I had been trained in that way as an engineer. But being that way, even though now I think I'd argue it's not my natural tendency, was like a bull in a china shop. And so what I'm most proud of is being able to heal myself, to evolve, to be a better version of myself today. And I'm pausing because I can't believe that I'm saying that on a podcast that's going to be public.
Well, I thank you for your vulnerability and transparency, right? Because that is what Rise and Reinvent is all about. Oftentimes we will hear the positive stories, right? The promotions and kind of what's on the other side of healing. but we don't hear about the journey that gets you there. And so I'm really grateful to you for sharing that part of your story and your journey so that others can be inspired by how you've overcome that with resilience. And so let's talk about that a little deeper, right? Tell us about a pivotal moment that really sparked your reinvention to become the woman that you are today.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. There were three really important ones. The first one was when I learned that perhaps engineering wasn't for me. I had been working as an engineer, but had gotten promoted into engineering management and was leading technical professionals. And I was the person who was sent in when the numbers just weren't right, when the cost was too high, the quality was subpar, or just production wasn't getting out in the speed that it needed to. And it was called, my title was generally called the business transformation expert. And I loved that job. But when I showed up, people generally were afraid. They were not sure what that meant for their job, what that meant for culture, but they did know that we were going to meet our targets. And we were meeting our targets, but people hated me. And so I was assigned a coach, and I did everything she told me to do. But what happened was one day I remember talking and I didn't even recognize myself, that I had shifted so much that I wasn't myself anymore. And I was going to quit my job. And I said, I need to do something else. Like, yeah, I get what you're saying. And yes, all of these things around emotional intelligence are important. And at the end of the day, I still have to be, who I fundamentally am. Otherwise, I'm going to be stressed. And so I transitioned into HR, leading just learning and development for technical professionals. And I loved it. It was one of the first times that I got to use multiple parts of my skills together. I understand how engineers' brain works, but my skill set is teaching adults how to learn new content. And
Okay.
um, I don't take an HR approach to the topic. I take a very logical, reasonable approach to you learning how to be more empathetic, or you learning how to be more emotionally intelligent and keeping yourself intact. But that transition today sounds like it was easy, but there's a lot of ego tied to being an engineer. People get excited to hear you're an engineer. No one gets excited to hear that you're a learning and development professional in HR. Like that, I mean, people were like, what are you doing? The second moment was the first time I was fired. I was working with a person I loved, doing work I loved, doing global keynote speaking, traveling the world, talking about leadership. And I mean, I'm going to double down on it and say I loved my boss. I loved working for him, with her. But we came to a point where I had been asked to do some work around inclusion and how to get the best out of all people on your team. And she had been just lived experience, raised in rural Iowa, and had not spent a lot of time with people who had my kinds of experiences. And so we would end up in these spaces where my values and hers would just bump up against each other because we had very different lived experiences. And even though the work was beautiful and wonderful, we ended up parting ways because she fired me. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but at that point in my career, I knew I didn't want to go back into a corporate environment because, and I know you know this all too well, when you put humor and justice and competence together, which are my three values, that
Mhm.
doesn't always work in a corporate environment. it,
No.
it it should, but it doesn't, and and so that's when I started my own business, and several of my former clients actually helped me to start my business. They were interested in still working together, and that was almost 9 years ago now. So those two, and then the personal one is 3 years ago. I learned that my father was not my father. And that was the first time I'd run into something my mind could not work me out of. Shifting from engineering to HR, my mind can work me out of that. Losing my job and starting my own firm, my mind can work me out of that. Learning that my father, who I thought I was his favorite child, whose name I have to have, and that's what people call me, was devastating. And then I had to do some different kind of work to like unpack that. What does it mean to lose your identity and not be able to make sense of that people you trusted betrayed you, and work through that while also trying to serve others. I lost my hair. My business suffered quite a bit. And in some ways, I even lost some family members because something that was, to me, just part of who I am now was a secret that they wanted to keep private. And so those three things have kind of shaped who I am today. And all of them were incredibly difficult moments in my life, on my journey.
Thank you for sharing that. And I have to imagine that there was definitely a mindset shift in each example, and that the mindset shift might have been different for the personal situation and taken longer versus some of the work situations. So, can you just talk about, as you're overcoming these major challenges in life, um, what what would you say to advise others who may be going through something similar on how to adjust their mindset?
You know, if there's one thing that I learned in therapy is that sometimes we try to shift too quickly from the pain of the situation onto what am I going to do next. That certainly was my experience. I did not like to grieve. I fully believe in accountability, and don't let your emotions get in the way. Like, we've got work to do is one of my mantras. Um, but understanding that it hurts and that you feel sad when you lose something that you worked really hard for is a very real human experience.
Mhm.
Sit with that for myself. It helps me to be better for myself, yes, but it also helps me not to judge other people when they are having a similar experience, and to show up with more grace. And so, what I was trying to do before, which was trying to act like I was emotionally intelligent, giving myself permission to feel has made me a more emotionally intelligent person because I understand the experience of emotion. It's not an act. And that's why I was never great at it before because it was performative. I'm trying to demonstrate something that I have not experienced really. And so one, I think, is give yourself time to grieve. But also my second bit of advice actually comes from Cat Williams, the comedian.
Okay.
He says, take a list, like write down a list of everything you have experienced that's negative. And when you look at that list, you just remember that you have overcome all of it. And it is evidence that you can overcome new things that you're going to be facing, that you have demonstrated resilience in the past. Maybe not in the same way, but those competencies are transferable. And I like that advice. I like that advice.
That is great advice coming from someone I wouldn't expect, but that's good. But comedy can help people, and when you said that's one of your skills, I was like, yeah, it can. It can really change your mood. It can change those around you. It can help you overcome adversity. So thank you for sharing that story. One of the things you said was therapy. In certain communities, therapy is um, not really respected. It's not something that people want to do. Can you talk about how including therapy in your reinvention and your process has really helped to make it successful?
Yeah, I think at first I was using therapy like you would use a coach. It was cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm just in there talking about whatever's most important to me, and I was getting something out of it. But to do like chair work, somatic therapy, working through like what we hold in our bodies, that's been the most transformative for me because really smart people. And I don't say that to be braggadocio. I'm actually saying it for whoever's listening, who's probably, I'm sure you have brilliant followers. Um, Especially if you're smarter than your therapist, you'll be in there trying to perform for them if you're not careful. Several of my therapists, we became friends, and then we couldn't be in a working relationship anymore. But the person that I'm working with now, um, I had gotten to a point where, as I said, that my hair had fallen out. The stress was so great that it was impacting me and my business in negative ways. And being with someone who is skilled at helping you to know what you're holding in your body, knowing what's going on when the words might fail you, is just critically important. And, interestingly enough, there have been people who've said to me that either my faith walk isn't as strong because I have a therapist, or, what do I feel like? Do I think people think I'm crazy because I have a therapist? I have always been fascinated by that position, because therapists kind of do what I do, but just they're credentialed in a different way. So if you're about self-improvement, I think it's interesting that all self-improvement except for clinical self-improvement, that's fascinating to me. And I invite people to interrogate that if that's where they're sitting, because therapy has been crucial in me understanding, what am I good at? What does the world need from me? But what things am I just horrible at? And I don't need to have shame around that. Like it's just not my gift. And it is okay that means some people I won't work for some people because of that. And
Mhm.
that's okay. Because I used to be a person who, regardless of what people called me at work, I really did want to be liked. Um, and likability is not bad, but thinking that everyone is going to like you is certainly a hindrance.
Yes, I remember the day. I was like, why does this person not like me? And it's like everyone's not gonna like you. And so I completely agree with you on that one, for sure. And so I appreciate your answer to that question. When life is unpredictable, how do you stay centered and clear-headed?
Yeah, it's unpredictable right now, right? Like every day it seems like something happens at the national level that I'm surprised by. Um, and then just the older we get, life is happening to people. Folks are checking out. It seems like at a greater rate than they were before.
Mhm.
Um, so for me, I think just generally I'm better than most at dealing with ambiguity, which is, if there's one thing my parents taught me, it was that the one thing you can depend on is change. The muscle that I'm still working, though, is agility. It is, how do you take in all of this information, because we are data rich, action poor, so much information, and then quickly decide what your next pivot is going to be. And my strategy is to, first of all, I do plan for what I can plan for. I have what are my goals I want to reach for my year? What are my quarterly targets to get me there? What do I need to do every week in order to be able to make my quarterly targets? I do that. I am religious about that, to make sure that at least I have some sense of, like, directionally where I want to go. But the measured gravitas that's necessary when things are just, I call it crazy making all around you. One, I'm a woman of great faith. So I pray religiously, and I also have what's called the three circles. This is not my framework. I don't know who created it, but what can I control? What are the things I can influence? And then what are those things that are just simply outside of my control? Kind of, I call it God's country. And whenever I find myself like spinning out because of the massive amounts of change, I always notice that I'm out there in God's country. I can't do anything about certain things. It's information, but I can't control it. I can't even. And so when I stay solidly in my zone of the things that I can control, Who are the people I can collaborate with in those spaces? What capacity do I have to give to it? That's what helps me to be able to handle massive amounts of change in ways that look like it's centered. But really, what it is it's filtered. I'm filtering out the things that have very little to do with me. I do care about polar ice caps melting, but I don't have any influence in that space right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to just keep it, like, put it in the proper perspective.
Great, excellent. And it's an important message. Focus on what you can control. Don't stress yourself out. Don't lose sleep on the things that are beyond your control. And if you focus on that, the good things will come through your spiritual beliefs. That is my understanding as well. Um, so imagine that you're at the start of a major transition. So you gave us examples of three major ones in your life. What advice would you give your prior self or your younger self around how you navigated that transition?
Yeah, one thing that I am working on right now that I need to be better at is one of my strengths, and Strengths Finder is an activator, like being a catalyst.
Mhm.
And that's good, except for sometimes I jump in too quickly, that I could be a little more methodical and planful and scheduled about things. Not to turn it into that, because it's not who I am, but I could be a little more. And so even when I think about the engineering transition, one of the first things I did was tell my coach I was going to quit. Now that worked out, but you know, I could have probably talked to some trusted colleagues, because I don't know if people know this, but your coach inside your corporation is not a trusted colleague. They are not usually they're not usually keeping your confidences. They're telling somebody. Now, a coach who's working as a consultant for your organization, maybe so, but the coach inside your organization, you should not trust them fully. That's just not being politically savvy enough. And I told her right away that I wanted to quit, and I would tell my younger self, let's talk to someone else outside that system about what you want to do and help you figure some things out, and then go back to your coach with maybe a plan. That's one thing. um I think today, while I believe it was helpful to me to get fired, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me, quite frankly. um I was not politically savvy, and I think there's a balance that I'm still trying to figure out between being honest and when when is the time right to be honest? When is the person who's listening to you ready to receive your honesty? um because the activator in me wants to tell you right now, the moment I know it, you know it.
Mhm.
And that is, man, if I could go back in history and work some of that out. I felt like I was violating something by not sharing right away. There's probably something to work there where I think it's a lie of omission or something. But I just a little more political savviness. And then I probably would have had some time to set up my business in a very different way, a better way.
Mhm.
Probably have more clients who were willing to come with me if I would have been more savvy.
I think it's a struggle. I know I definitely experienced it where there's no rule book on navigating corporate politics. There's no, I mean, there are books, of course, but every company culture is different. Every individual is different. And so what I have found is that, in order to navigate those difficult conversations, having a relationship ahead of time, having the credibility to challenge. Because if you challenge and you're standing alone, which I've done many, many times in my career, if the people in that room don't respect you and believe that you deserve to have a different opinion, then it's going to fall flat. And that's unfortunate, right? Because you have people like you who you want to say what's on your mind and you want everybody to know in that moment. But you have to sort of massage the message have the meetings before the meeting to make sure that it's not a total shocker
Well,
sometimes.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Nicole, because I believed everything I learned in class. In all those leadership classes where they're saying, bring your authentic self to work, that healthy conflict looks like bringing up lifting up the rocks and calling out the dirty worms. But when I look back in history, yeah, in theory, but if that's not the kind of culture you work in, and that's what you're saying, there were people who would egg me on to be the one to be the truth teller,
Mhm.
and then they would support me in the hallway, but not in the room. So now when it's time to decide who is a secession material or not, well, now I'm looked at as the one who's not politically savvy enough, not emotionally intelligent enough, not strategic enough, right? Um, it still chaps my hide. There was an engineering assignment that, I mean, we're talking 25 years old, this story, and I
Mhm.
still, you see, I'm bringing it up today. It was a $10 million idea. And because did not present it in the way that I honestly probably would present it today, I couldn't make it happen. And they did it. The organization I was working for implemented that project 10 years later. And when I think about what it would look like if I had taken a year to build coalitions, to build support, versus doing what I did, which was get me and a couple of other engineers together and put together a plan, and we're just going to present it. Because what I was told was we value innovation, we
Mhm.
value stretch, we value, shaking things up. The truth of the matter is 100-year-old organizations don't value that, actually. They don't. And it's like being able to read the tea leaves and paying attention to the difference between what people say versus what they're doing, what gets rewarded versus what gets said. Those are very different things. And I didn't understand any of that. And it's a type of empathy, actually, to be able to read what's not being said. And I wish I could help my younger self with that.
Yes, absolutely. So, empathy, grace. As a
Mm.
leader, to me, those are the two very key things, right? You have an employee that's, high performing, high developer that really wants to contribute, but that you need to create a safe space for them to do that. And in order to do that, you need to have empathy and you need to have grace. Maybe they'll come up with something that um, is maybe not for today, but maybe in the future. And so recognizing their voice, and empowering them to speak up is critical from a leadership perspective. And when you say 100-year-old companies don't innovate, I had to really think about that for a minute. In my experience, they do, but it's incremental at the core. My,
It's
small.
slow.
It's slow compared to a startup. And so one of my roles was how do you make a 100-year-old company, Delta Airlines, think and act like a startup? And
Mm.
so we had the support at the top, but navigating an organization that size, it took some time, right? You have to change mindsets. You have to change, in a company like that, you don't take huge risks because there's rewards, there's consequences to that. I'm sorry. And
Yeah.
so I agree with you. It's not the easiest thing to do, but it is possible.
Oh, yes. And the skill is coalition building.
Yeah.
It's what you said. You can't go at it alone. And when I think about just the way engineers are trained, which is to, you are some of the smarter people, is what you're thinking, and that the goal is to be able to deliver 10 times whatever your salary is. You get the smartest engineers in the room, we're just ready to go. Like this, of course, this is the most efficient and effective way to do this thing. And the fact that the organization ended up doing it 10 years later means they agreed.
Mhm.
But now what I know about people, you have to bring people along. You can't just tell people what to do. You especially when ego and power and positionality is a very real and present thing. Um, you have to be able to do that, and so you slow down to go faster, which an activator just isn't great at, right? Like I'm just not. It takes some finessing. So I had to. I would go back and tell my younger self to be just slightly more savvy.
Mhm. And you learn from experiences. You learn from failing. You learn from others and their mistakes. And so you figure it out. But, hopefully it's not like too late in your career when you actually learn these things. So I wanted to ask you, you're a very ambitious person. How do you balance your drive and your ambition with your personal well-being?
Well, I know the people who love me the most would definitely say that there's some trade-offs that I'm making, that I probably don't spend as much time that the people closest to me would want. But I do find the time for my own, what I call self-care. But I learned this as a result of that personal issue that I had, that this is critical. So I work out religiously. I schedule around it. I generally do not make exceptions for that. If there's a flight that happens in the morning when I got to see my trainer, we just got to find a different time. We act like that time is just not available. Um, I try to eat well. I try to get good sun. I always go, to my doctors to make sure that everything is okay. And I see my therapist. And my therapist is not, how some people, I'm sure you know this, some people use their therapy as like, oh, let me go to my therapist so that they can help me work out this situation. My therapist is there to help me figure out patterns of behavior that
Mhm.
need to be broken, um, rebuilt, rethought. And it is helping me be a more efficient person in terms of how I show up with others. And so that's what my routine looks like. I get decent sleep. And, it's interesting. We all have the same 24 hours in the day, but I find I'm far more efficient when I stick to my routines, when I have slept, when I have eaten well. Um, and kind of tracking these things has helped me to see the value in them being non-negotiables, especially when you're dealing with really heavy challenges and topics consistently.
Was that something you learned later in your journey?
Yeah, I think the thing I was worst about was like how I ate and being religious about like workouts. It's like the easiest thing for me to do was to skip my workout or work over my workout or travel during my workout. Like I don't need that. And food, I'm in the Midwest. And listen, I'm in Kansas City, honey, where barbecue is king. But if I track food and like mood and food and like amounts I'm able to get done, there's definitely a correlation between, we need to eat mostly plants, real food, mostly plants, not too much. And when I do that, my mind is clearer. But I didn't really give a whole lot of credence to any of that before I had, again, so many things that my mind could not work me out of. The taking care of the body to release whatever trauma you might be experiencing in your body became like a religious ritual for me.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned self-care because self-care is so important. We spend so much of our energy and our time uh, in our career and probably not as much as we should in our personal lives. So that whole idea of work-life balance is there's never a true balance per se. But sometimes it takes something like a health scare, or, when you look at how long we sit each day and not having movement every day and the weight gains and all those things that kind of triggers you into that. So, for those listening, start your self care now because it can impact your mental, your physical, anything. your family. And it's just so important. So
Yeah,
important.
I wrote an article in the spirit of vulnerability, just talking about like my hair having fallen out from the stress of, it was purely stress. It was nothing else. And it was amazing the number of responses I got from other people who learned the importance of self-care because things like anxiety showing up in their bodies or hair falling out. And it was fascinating because for me, I was like, oh, either you learn pleasantly or painfully. I learned it the painful route, but you don't have to. You don't have to learn everything through experience. You can hear other people talk about this and take it to heart and do something different.
And I always think of the analogy of you're on the airplane, something goes wrong, put your mask on first before you help others. And you're thinking, well, that's backwards, right? I want to make sure my kid or my companion is taken care of. But it's really true in life because if you're not taking care of self, you can't help others. You can't support others in the way that they need you.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be able to show up as the best version of yourself. You know,
Yes.
I never try to think of self-care as like, forget you, Nicole, this is about me. It's not that, actually. It is, I'm taking care of myself so I can take better care of our relationship that we have between each other. And if I'm being honest, my personal life does suffer because I am one of those people that my work is my passion. And so sometimes I don't always realize that I'm working. Still working on that too.
We're all there. I'm going to say that. I haven't found the solution, but if there's someone out there listening, call me and I'll share it with the world because I mean, if you, especially if you're passionate about your work and especially if you are an entrepreneur, everything blends.
Yeah.
Everything. Blends. There's no way to separate and have that true balance. But just self-care is one thing and making time for yourself, whether that's daily, weekly, taking a vacation, whatever that looks like, making sure you live life to the fullest whenever you can.
Yeah. I've got vacations scheduled in a couple weeks, and it will be the first time that I've taken like a week-long vacation in a long time. Well, I haven't since I started my business, actually. And that's 9 years. Now, of course, like holidays when everything's shut down, but just me being gone when everybody else is still working, that has not happened in 9 years.
Well, I am glad it's happening in a few weeks. Uh,
Yeah, but the feeling that I have, it's like I am not working on this vacation. I'm nervous about it. It's, I'm working through it. But it's like, okay, don't take your laptop.
if the right people know, well, I agree, don't take your laptop because you will be.
I'll
Uh,
work. I will work. I know my.
yes. I used to say, okay, I'm going to take my laptop and I'm only going to do it on the plane. And then once I get there, I'm going to put my laptop away. But even the time on the plane, you want to unwind, maybe watch a movie, close your eyes, whatever it is you want to do. So I would encourage you not to work on your break. And then maybe next year, instead of 1 week, it'll be two.
2 weeks. Look at that.
I know people who've done it 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and I'm like, I don't know how, but they've done it. So
The world doesn't stop. The world doesn't stop. They come back and it's all still there.
you might have more emails in your inbox, but you'll get through them.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So I want to follow up. When you reflect on your journey, what legacy do you hope to leave?
Yeah. Um, I want to leave this world, or at least the people I touch, more empathetic than I found it. Um, when I think about how I show up today, empathy is still not in my top 5 strengths. Like it's not. But empathy can be learned and it can be demonstrated by anybody. And it makes us smarter. When I think about mental empathy and who's best at it, you've got therapists, of course, hostage negotiators and detectives, sociopaths. And when I look at that list, I'm like, some of the world's most well-meaning people are not empathetic because they don't even try. They don't try to understand things from another person's perspective so that they can make the next right decision. And I am on a mission to change that. And I hope that when I leave here, that with my name, people will associate a more empathetic world.
Love that. So, how do you define success moving forward, both personally and professionally? Seems to align very well with what you just said.
Yeah, it's kind of lofty professionally, but my hope is, and right now we're kind of going the other way because I just saw an article about empathy being called a sin, and I'm like, sheesh. When a Christian says that, we got a whole problem. But what I'm starting to see is that when someone hears about empathy in anything, if it shows up in a movie, if it shows up in an article, if somebody's being interviewed and they're talking about it, they'll send it to me and say, this made me think of you. Ideally, success for me professionally is that nobody is even thinking about my name necessarily, or that when I said empathy, when they heard empathy, that made them think of me. That's not what I want. What I want is that I start to see empathy more in these systems. That, you know what, if you are impacted by the criminal justice system, they know they need to give you your ID when you get out, because when you're a returning citizen, that's a critical component to you not going back. Understanding that and then making the next right decision to give me a cot and 3 meals a day coming in. Can I get some ID on the way out? What does it look like in education? We tried it during COVID to feed every child because we forced people by law to be in school all day, every day. Feed them. You know, you have to be there. If not, it's illegal. Feed them. When you can see that if every church adopted a homeless person, that we would eradicate homelessness in our country, that just starts to happen. That's lofty, but that's what good looks like. And I know that I might not even see it in my lifetime, but I'm hopeful that I can be the catalyst for it. There's that activator thing again, that I can be the catalyst for this to start happening. That the world's biggest problems are not so lofty that we cannot solve them, like that we can. Now, personally, I have this small problem because both of my parents and several of my family members died in accidents. So they left home in the morning and did not make it back, but they were thinking they would. So I regularly think about if today is my last day. And so because of that, I think personally what good looks like is that what I believe God has given me my purpose to do and what I show up and do every day, that those two things are aligned, that I feel like those two things are aligned. And so every day I think I get a chance to experience what good looks like because I am always checking for that alignment. So I'm not thinking 10, 12 years out what good looks like. I want it to look good every day because I am regularly just aware that I might not have the time I think I have.
That's very deep, but very reflective and inspiring as well. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I have personally been touched and inspired by your resilience, your strength, and your vision for an empathetic world. And so, thank you for your time. I hope to stay connected with you, and we'll talk again later.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Thanks, Nicole.